You're listening to FitPro Sessions with Parallel Coaching, Season 4, Episode 8. Hi, I'm Neil Bergman, and today's podcast, Hayley and I are talking all about musculoskeletal conditions. So stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Neil Bergman.
And I'm Hayley Bergman. Over the last 10 years, we've helped thousands of fitness professionals to get qualified, learn with simplicity, and coach clients with confidence.
We're the first to say that learning and being a fit pro doesn't have to be hard work, and that with the right structure, support and resources, you can become a confident and knowledgeable fitness professional that is dedicated to more.
So how do you learn, qualify and kickstart as a fit pro? This is the FitPro Session Podcast with Parallel Coaching.
Vero was picking up the barbell, passing it over to Allan, okay? And although we'd done consultation number 1 and consultation number 2, and I knew the ins and outs of what was going on with Allan's conditions, and I'd seen the flare-ups in his hands before. So the condition I'm talking about here is osteoarthritis. Okay. Yep. And he said he gets flare-ups at different times of the day. And so we deliberately placed this session late morning. Okay, it was one of our first early sessions. It was kind of I wouldn't say experimental. It doesn't matter, I suppose, how much experience or how long you've been in the industry. You're still, dare I say, somewhat guessing as you work with a client to truly figure out and find out, you know, what's best, what am I going to give him, what works, what time of day, etc.
What's more comfortable.
Yeah, so this is kind of a late morning session, and I passed Allan the barbell. It was an early exercise, I remember, inside the session, and his hands, and it literally I almost froze in time, and time slowed down because his hands, for a better word, were completely deformed this particular morning. More so as a flare-up goes. I think this was like the flare-up of flare-ups.
What kind of deformity? And nodules around the knuckles?
Completely. So for those of you on screen, or those of you who are listening, providing you don't have, severe flare-ups of osteoarthritis right now, look at your fingers and the digits, okay, are straight, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas if I look down at Allan's hands, they were resembled, for a better word or letter, the letter Z.
Okay, they were more zigzag.
They were more zigzag, completely. So let's add some context to this. Let's rewind, okay? So we're talking about musculoskeletal conditions today. We're talking about arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, osteoporosis.
And hip and knee replacements.
So we're ultimately talking about...
Which is a lot of conditions.
Yeah, so some of them are autoimmune, some are develop later in life, some are genetic. There's a whole host
to bones and joints, basically.
We're talking about bones and joints, and I think the first rule I want to add out here to any fit pro, even outside of these conditions, is joints act, muscles react. Okay, so I'm going to park that one there.
So the problems with their joints will impact their muscles and the rest of the body down the line.
Completely.
And I'm guessing that's part of the case with Allan when you're talking about him grabbing that barbell or not being able.
No, and that was not necessarily the first time I'd come across this condition, because I had done other bits with other clients, but this was the first time I'd truly seen a really bad flare up. So, Allan couldn't even wrap his fingers around the barbell. Okay, and it was at that point I suppose my empathy for the client changed radically.
Nice.
For all clients, the customer service skills to plan an effective workout that got the client from A to B where they wanted to go. But my exercise library, in an instant, had just been thrown in the bin.
Yeah, well, that barbell's out.
Yeah, completely.
If you can't hold it, it's hard enough doing it if you can hold it.
Yes.
And there's enough safety issues with spotting if you can do it.
Completely.
So out of interest, just to put you on the spot, what did you do with Allan instead of holding the barbell?
Allan, and this is where
I don't know what exercise it was. I'm there assuming a bench press, but
we were just going in for a barbell biceps curl.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I went straight towards, and I thought, don't worry, where I put the barbell down, and he'd had a towel around his neck. Okay, and this was one of the first.
That's an old school thing.
Completely.
Isn't it? Towel around your neck.
I mean, I can't remember how old Allan was, but from memory, I'm gonna
70s?
Yeah, he's in his 70s. So kind of this classic old cool guy. Tennis shoes on with those
white socks with a little black line.
No, yeah, completely. But the shoes were almost like squash shoes with the orange sole to them. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But what I really remember was this classic kind of water bottle in one hand, towel around his neck in case he got sweaty, but he never built up enough of a movement, I suppose, to truly get the sweat on. But Allan felt good. That was the main thing.
Yeah.
Okay. But this towel was around his neck, and that was the first, I'm going to say, introductory time for me to really experience the use of alternative bits of kit to get the result.
Yeah.
And that's why I developed this exercise library. And if you've been on course with us on any of the PT courses or the circuits course, I show you how to utilize a towel to basically mimic any fitness resistance machine now, which is pretty damn cool, I'm going to say. So straight away I said, do you mind if we use the towel? And
I suppose the nice thing about this is that the grip around the towel is quite comfortable.
Yes.
You can hold on to the thickness of the towel.
Exactly. So he could sink his hands and his fingertips and his nails into the towel, not clasp it with any like major pressure that puts any undue stress on my joints, but he could firmly grab hold of this, and his joints could move in a position where his joints, dare I say, wanted to move that morning based on the flare up. Whereas the barbell is, you're in a supine, your hands in a supine position. You have to go through flexion, extension, and be very strict on where the wrist is. Whereas now I could change the intensity as we went through the 12 or 15 reps, whereas with the barbell, the load stays the same. I could give him a different barbell, but the load stays the same, and his supine position stays the same. Whereas now with the towel, using my resistance, we could keep all the variables of comfort and empathy and overload changed. And I suppose, I know I feel like I'm talking all the time.
I like it. Keep telling us about Allan.
And what I learned so much that morning with Allan was empathy for overload.
Yes.
Now, we all know that we have to achieve overload to yield a result. We all know that you have to have general adaptation syndrome or specific adaptation to an imposed demand.
Yes.
Okay, and they're in earlier episodes if you want to go back and listen. But that morning, I understood what I'm going to class as empathy overload was.
You had to reassess what overload was.
Yeah, completely. For me, overload is like technical fatigue, technical overload.
The muscles getting to the point of failure. They can't carry on.
Okay, and
or at least challenge.
That morning with Allan was a point of like empathy overload.
And look,
for the condition.
You've got another factor to bear in mind now. So usually, let's say we've got somebody training that experiences no pain in their joints. When they're training, you would measure the fatigue level and where you want to stop on that overload as being, well, that muscle's about to fatigue, it's about to overload, it's about to get challenged. And you go, cool, that's enough, that's loaded, they can't lift any more. But if the reason why they can't lift any more repetitions is not the muscle and it's actually in the joint or it's pain related, then you need another way of measuring. And I really like the pain scale for this. This is probably my favourite. I know we've used this on
We mentioned it
ones.
in the low back pain episode, which is 2 episodes back. This is episode 8. You need to go back to number 6. Yeah, I think.
That's the one. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling in terms of pain? 1 being absolutely fine, really good day. 10 being max out pain.
Yeah.
Call me an ambulance.
One of the things with not just with Allan but osteoarthritis is that the flare-ups are usually in the morning and can be worse or with colder weathers. So we found with Allan that kind of as we went into kind of the winter months, the flare-ups would be slightly earlier in the day and a little bit more harsh, a bit more severe. Yeah. And so his recording of kind of pain threshold or pain scale would vary as we went through the different seasons of the year, which I found incredibly interesting.
It's amazing how the body adapts.
Yeah, completely.
And that's because osteoarthritis is inflammation based. So it's inflammation in the joint based on issues around the cartilage, usually down to that cartilage having worn down at the end of the bone. So obviously any joint is 2 bones meeting, at least 2. And at that point is where the cartilage wraps around the end of the joint, that can get real inflammation in, and that's the pain, that's the deformity that you're starting to see in Allan's hands, is that inflammation around the area to help protect it.
And as different days went on, we would train a couple of times per week. Some days he would turn up and his fingers would almost, dare I say, look normal. And other days would look like a spaghetti junction on a motorway. But we had a real good laugh with it. And I think that's what came of it, was actually treating this condition. That was Allan, and he learned to live with it and love it and hate it.
Yeah.
And rather than kind of, I suppose, demonize it and see it as a negative thing, Allan realized that this was his life. And that's what he'd grown into.
And he could now just work with that.
And what I loved is, as we got into exercise and we challenged some nutritional habits and behaviours, what we saw was less flare-ups and less harsh flare-ups. So we soon recognised that actually...
So looking for trends.
Yeah.
Across what he's eating, what lifestyle he's doing,
Completely.
And also some medications can cause flare-ups, all sorts of different
100%. And what we saw was overall quality of life improve, and it was real, what I consider now in my mid to late 30s as kind of givens to daily life. For example, being able to dry myself after a shower comfortably, being able to carry the shopping, being able to have a dexterity to open up the door, to put the key in the door, to hold the keys, those types of things, like things that we almost take for granted. And
even down to like phones and like being like how much dexterity you need just to be able to do like a simple text on a phone.
Completely. And that's what I loved about working with Allan, as I've used in today, but other clients, is just seeing the quality of life change as the outcome goal. We'd have other performance related goals in there as well, but ultimately the outcome goal here was, dare I say, like quite broad, quite woo-woo of like quality of life.
And actually that's keeping him moving regardless of the condition, that he prevents any future conditions
the
or
more
problems.
Kind of small, I always use this of like small hinges swing big doors, but the small things that I consider small but were massive in Allan's world gave him the boost in self-confidence, a boost in self-efficacy, and he had a couple of grandchildren and a great-grandchild and whatnot, and you could see over the course of weeks or months his ability to interact and willingly kind of get down on the floor, knew he had the ability to kind of push up off the floor, pick up the kids, and knowing he had a problem with his hands, but he also could control that.
Yeah. And also Allan's story is just arthritis of the hands.
Yeah, completely.
But osteoarthritis is in 8.5 million people across the UK. So it's massive. In fact, it's like the biggest grumble for older populations.
Completely. So what we're seeing this is in both male and female, but predominantly females from the age of kind of 45 onwards. Yeah. But once you reach 60...
over the age of 65, 50% of people have it. And it could be anywhere in the body. So we're talking about any joints. Now, osteoarthritis, like I say, is the inflammation around that joint. Cool. So that could be anywhere. And quite often there will be areas that people have had significant wear and tear on. So, for example,
Allan was a builder. Allan worked with a builder. So he was always on a building site. He grew up on a building site in the 70s, 80s and 90s.
How many times he bashed his hands, had to pick things up.
Completely cold weathers, woodwork. He did a lot of stuff in his shed with woodwork. So, like you're saying, it's wear and tear on a particular joint. So
runners, particularly
the question
around
is
knees.
when it comes back to posture here, I always like to think about, and this is what we're putting in our new squat assessment courses, overuse, underuse and misuse. So my question or inquiry for Allan was, where did we overuse for joints? Where did we underuse other joints? Okay, and where have we misused particular joints? So for example, the overuse for Allan was his right hand, because he was right-handed. So all of the kind of fiddly jobs, the bigger jobs on site.
Finer coordination,
whether it be hammer, drill, saw, whatever, okay, being very stereotypical now on construction, was always right-handed, and so therefore his left hand was underused, okay, and it was his right hand that would flare up more. So now he's got overuse and underuse, but where was the misuse? So the misuse would have been...
Well, it's usually like an injury or whacking your hand
with a hammer.
Well,
it was his left hand, oddly, that actually came off worse at times, because he could tell me hundreds of stories completely. It was like, this is where I cut this hand off, and this is where I cut the end of this finger off, and this is where a nail gun went through this hand, and you're like, oh great, But you're right.
Well, so there's a correlation between the area that's been injured and the likelihood of having osteoarthritis in that joint. So if you've sprained an ankle, that's more likely to be your problem area that is then misused later, and then that might be the area that leads towards arthritis either in that particular joint or plus or minus a joint. So it then might affect, say, the knee, for example.
What I like about this, and it's probably like there's probably a number of people listening to this inside fitness and outside fitness going, well, I'm over 65, I don't have it. But the message here is for Fit Pros is, yes, you could be working with an older group of people, an older population, and you can get some incredibly fit 80, 85, 90-year-olds come down to your boot camp and dare I say, probably outperform some of the youngsters. However, your consultation still requires that inquiry question, world-class question of finding out where the injuries have happened, okay, where they've potentially underused, misused, or overused particular joints, okay, and whether or not they do have this condition. Because you could have this condition, say in a knee, and it give you no real bother, just a little bit of discomfort. But what we don't want to do is place any undue stress or pressure on that joint. So things like any bounding work, any plyometric, any harsh impact, jumping, bounding, high knees, fast feet, burpees, jumping on and off of a block.
Yeah, they're all out.
Not necessarily they're all out for everybody, but we don't want to make this condition.
It doesn't become
worse.
The feature of what they're doing.
Completely.
There's other ways to kind of progress.
No, we know, but whatever we enjoy, we do more of. So this person might go, well, I've got osteoarthritis in my left knee. It doesn't really play up. I'm going to go down to my local boot camp. I'm all good. Join in. And after just a few weeks, that knee could be, dare I say, debilitating.
Yeah. Or
to a point where they go, actually, I don't enjoy moving anymore. They start to develop what we call as fear avoidance. They know that exercise, the like you just said, I think you've hit the nail on the head. The linking of one action leads to discomfort and pain, and therefore they go, well, exercise does this to me. I'm not going to exercise anymore.
Yes. And that's why there's things like, I'm going to say Zumba Gold rather than Zumba, whereby it's a low impact version of an existing class that therefore has taken out all the high impact jumping and the twisting and the movements to make it more simple and easier to go through pain-free.
And that's what I love about this episode, because it's about empathy, okay, and having a new level of understanding of empathy for the client. But 8.5 million people is crazy, right? So if you think there's 70 million people on this island right now, as we know as the UK, 8.5 million people, that's 20%.
I'm not very good at maths.
Maybe. Well, it's huge. It's crazy.
Anyway.
We should have done that stat. But it's a lot of people, right? So the likelihood of you as a fit pro, whether you're a personal trainer, yoga, Pilates, exercise to music, aqua, whatever, the likelihood of, certainly I'm going to say with aqua, the likelihood even goes up, because that typically attracts an older person, because it's non-weight bearing.
Exactly, it takes the pressure off of the joint, so it would feel more comfortable to train in water, surely.
It would do, but now here's the thing, ready? So the point I wanted to make was, we're gonna come across these people with musculoskeletal conditions. Now you go, well, okay, that's great, I'm gonna do aqua. But now we've got to consider that getting in and out of the pool is the toughest part, and is weight bearing, it's not in the water. So most flare-ups or aches and pains or sudden sharpness of discomfort occur getting in and out of a pool.
Getting ready.
And then you've got this wet tiled floor. Do you know the biggest thing for somebody with a musculoskeletal condition is the risk of falling over?
Oh God,
and
if
once you fall over,
fracture.
and the likelihood, this is fact, it's not stereotypical, but the studies show that the older you get, we're an aging, bigger population, as in BMIs are going up with age.
Which is also a risk factor. So the likelihood of being overweight and having osteoarthritis go hand in hand, and osteoarthritis to obesity go hand in hand. Yeah.
So once this body weight starts to fall because they've slipped on the side of a pool, and body weight goes over, there's almost no stopping this body falling. And the first thing to hit the ground, first two things to hit the ground will be the hip or the wrist. Now we put our wrists out to protect us, but yet wrists are one of the major sites for fractures in osteoporosis and osteoarthritis and arthritis.
Yeah, it's wrists, hip and spine are the three biggies.
And now you've got potential of a fracture, which leads to a joint replacement, and we're going to go into that later. And that route scares me.
Whilst talking about hip fractures, the hip fractures themselves are really, really dangerous, regardless of the replacement. So 1 in 3 of people over the age of 50, when they have a hip fracture, will die within 12 months.
That's crazy, right?
And that, like, the causes that relate to it end up becoming things like respiratory and cardiovascular because of problems with clots, problems with inactivity. You get a fracture, you can't move. So now the inactivity means that all the other comorbidities go through
which
the
is
roof.
what next week's episode is all about, which is the danger or the risk of comorbidities upon the person. So let's go back to it. So whilst aqua is considered to be like,
yeah, we got that from aqua.
yeah, that was the rabbit hole, the tedious thing. But would be like great once you're in, okay. And I've seen a number of swimming pools for last, I'm going to say 8 to 10 years, where you've got like nice walk-in slopes down into the pool, and the actual floor of a pool
Rather
can
than
go
those
up and
horrible
down.
steps where your bum's like right in the face of everybody else.
Yeah, completely. Trying to pull your wedgie out. So there we go. So that's, I don't know, I love these musculoskeletal conditions because it allows me to really geek out on, I'm going to say anatomy, because it comes down to posture. Because if we go back to that point of like joints act, muscles react, a muscle can only be as strong or do its job based on the range of movement given at the joint.
Yep.
So if the joint is inhibited, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Limited by range of motion based on inflammation, then the tension and length or the propensity of what the muscle can or can't do is governed by the joint. And I think this completely, I hope that flipped the whole fitness industry on your head right now, because so many people go, oh, I need a new exercise for legs, or what can I do instead of a squat? So I always say, rather than focus on what the exercise is, focus on what's happening at the joint.
What joint action
are you looking for?
And what range of movement are that?
What range of movement, what plane of movement are you working within? And now you can start to make a really smart science-backed decision over, now I'm going to do the squat, and you can justify why.
Amazing.
Okay.
I like that.
So
that's really smart.
Joints act, muscles react. The muscle can only do what it can do based on what the joint can do.
Yeah.
Like the muscle can hypertrophy, it can atrophy. Okay, it can grow, it can waste away, it can maintain. It could be type 1, type 2A, type 2B. It can develop into so many different things. Yet the bones and the joints and the skeletal system, they're staying. And not only are they staying, they're progressively getting worse with age.
After we get to age 30, our bone density starts to drop, and at that point, that's sad. It's only 30, and then it's a downhill battle from there.
And what you do during your first 30 years, how much you move, okay, and what you eat in terms of the quality of your diet also can determine heavily on the density of your skeletal system.
Yes.
Okay, so if we had, I don't know, 2 people, and let's make them polar opposite. Person A as a kid had a very healthy upbringing.
Are we going down the bone density as well now?
So healthy diet, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Then they're going to go into adulthood with an incredibly strong skeletal system, and the risk factor of developing musculoskeletal conditions doesn't go, it just reduces, or they might get it later in life.
Yeah.
Versus person B, who had a very energy dense, very sugary, inactive childhood, that goes into adult life, let's just say, as overweight to obese, develops obesity, the likelihood of them developing a musculoskeletal condition at a younger age ramped up massively.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned a lot about nutrition in there being really, really important.
Yeah.
And it's not just about osteoarthritis that we were just talking about in terms of joint health. You've also then got the bones themselves and bone mass density.
Yeah.
And how food in particular starts to now impact our bone mass that we have.
Cool.
And you may have heard about, you need calcium for strong bones.
You must drink a glass of milk.
There's other sources of calcium are available.
Number 1 would be broccoli. Next one would be spinach.
Green leafy veg.
There we go.
Right in there.
Anyway.
There we go. It's not all from dairy. But anyway.
That's a big myth though, right?
Big myth.
Because actually you're going to get greater levels of calcium via green leafy vegetables compared to the equivalent quantity or value of milk.
Throws out milk and cookies, doesn't it?
Damn it! I like my milk and cookies.
Spinach and cookies.
Spinach and cookies. That's exactly what we're going to do straight after this podcast. Instead of cookies and milk.
So in terms of the strength,
Go and get the spinach out, Hayley.
and the density of the bones, if you think whilst we're growing, in particular up until that age of 30, and our bone mass is still growing.
I'm almost fully grown. No.
You're well over fully grown.
Oh, cheers, mate. Thank you. Carry on.
You're not under 30.
Well, I could have pulled it off then.
You are looking young today.
I do feel like I'm looking younger. It's all about spinach. Let's keep on track.
So the bone mass density obviously is increasing as we get up to the age of 30, and then after that point, approximately, we start to reduce our bone mass density. But that point, that 30-year-old point, means that the food that we have as children brings that 30-year-old point, either that peak, closer, so younger, or not necessarily older, but younger. So if we eat, in particular, high sugary foods, if we have not enough calcium,
So you're saying
not
the
enough
peak
vitamin
could be at,
B,
say, 22 years old?
we bring it younger, which means you're more likely to have problems as you get older in terms of osteoporosis. So that becomes the...
Let's jump into osteoporosis then, because we're talking about the quality of the bone and the bone mass density, which effectively is osteoporosis.
Exactly. So osteoporosis is, as you explained,
Yeah.
now I really like this in terms of chocolate. So I love chocolate.
Okay.
So I'm going to bring the chocolate analogy out.
I prefer spinach, I must admit. No.
Right, so this isn't about eating chocolate. This is about understanding the density of the bone.
Cool.
So if you have, I want you to think of 2 chocolate bars. One's an aero, one's a crunchie.
Ooh, I actually quite like crunchies, to be honest.
Right, so take your crunchie and just snap it in half.
Yeah.
When you snap it in half...
Can I eat one half of them?
You can eat one half
you.
now. I don't have this for you. So on that one half of the crunch, as you look at it, you can see that there are a few holes in there, but it's strong and it's pretty stable as a chocolate bar goes. It's pretty stable. You could, it was a clean break when we broke it,
Yeah, it's
right?
a clear snap.
Yeah, it's strong, it's stable. Whereas the aero has got bigger gaps inside it, which makes it more brittle. So if I was to then try and break in half an aero, not along the little lines, but across
Cross section.
It's much more crumbly, right?
Yeah.
So I do that and it crumbles, and then the big holes in between are because that's what makes it more crumbly, less dense. Yeah. So we're saying that the crunchie is really dense, it's got high density, whereas the aero hasn't.
Yeah.
Now the aero, in this case, let's bring it back to what we're actually talking about,
osteoporosis.
Is osteoporosis, and the crunchie is the healthy bone.
Cool. I've got another analogy I kind of like, I've been using with...
Is it chocolate?
No, it's not chocolate, but it's to do with money.
For money.
For money. Okay, so on one of the live trainings I did the other day, I used this analogy. I've used yours an awful lot, actually. I do prefer yours, but I do like this one as well, which is imagine a bank account, okay? So at the peak age of, let's say, the ripe old age of 28 to 30, when you've got maximum bone density, your bank is flooded with money.
Nice.
Okay.
Our bones are flooded with nutrients.
That's the peak bone mass. Okay. You've got as much money in your bank as you could possibly fit in.
Yeah.
Okay. And then from there on in, you don't put any more money into the bank. You just start taking withdrawals. Okay, so for every day, let's just say, I don't know, your bank had £1 million in. Every day after that peak, you take out a £50 note. Yeah. And the next day a £50 note, and the next day a £50 note. Because even though I'm still active, I'm eating healthy, I'm moving, I'm still putting wear and tear on my joints. I get up out of bed, I go down the stairs, I'm moving around at work, I'm moving, even just writing and using my hand with a pen, for example, or a mouse. I'm taking withdrawals out of my bank account to the point where I've taken too many withdrawals. Okay, and there comes a point where now you're going into your overdraft. Okay, and so I class a kind of osteoporosis as the overdraft and the point of where you're almost, dare I say, bankrupt. At the point you need to have surgery, you're now bankrupt. Do you like that?
That's an analogy. And also I could imagine the osteoblasts and osteoclasts. So osteoblasts are building my bank account.
Up until the age of, say, 25,
and we still
28.
have some osteoblasts
completely.
later on.
But you're in favour of osteoclasts, which is
The ones that collapse it.
But collapse down. So C, claps for osteoclasts, and then B for build osteoblasts.
Yeah.
Completely. So I like that bank account analogy
good.
where you're building up the bank account during the, your youth and your teens and your early adulthood life. And then after that, it's a withdrawal process until effectively you're bankrupt. So,
and there's so many different things that cause this withdrawal.
Yeah.
But in terms of the diagnosis of osteoporosis, this is where you get, like, they use a DEXA scan to be able to, as one of the ways of diagnosing, yes, you're osteoporotic. But osteoporosis is classed as being, it's a T scale. So it's literally T equals minus 2.5 or above. So the minus 2.5 basically means that you're 2.5 times more likely to have a fracture than a healthy bone at zero. At T equals 0. So it's T minus 2.5 or more for osteoporosis. And then there's something called osteopenia, which is slightly before it, which basically is between -1 and minus 2.5.
Perfect. Cool.
So it kind of shows you
So
that
just
at that point,
for purposes of this,
they're now bankrupt.
Completely. You got no money.
That's the minus 2.5
completely.
is the bankruptcy.
You need a credit card, my friend.
Yes.
And the credit card would be medication.
Yes.
A credit card is where you're buying back something to kind of put you back into some positive territory.
Yeah, exactly that. Well, even if you look at the action, just because you took me there now, but the action of biphosphonates, which is one of the medications, your face then, you're like, oh my
I didn't know where we were
going, is to literally block the osteoclasts and encourage more osteoblasts.
Perfect. There's your credit card, which is your biphosphonates. Biphosphonates, which is one of the medications. You mentioned the word osteopenia.
Osteopenia is essentially not quite osteoporosis, but the bank account is looking a bit ropey. So it's essentially you're on your way to debt.
Yeah. When you get when you look at your bank account and you're like on a Friday night and you're like, oh really?
But it's reduced bone mass density, which means that they are still more likely to have a fracture than a healthy bone.
Okay, cool.
Between -1 and minus 2.5.
We mentioned like biphosphonates as like for medications, other medications, and what I find, or I always find bizarre, and we're going to do a podcast next week with comorbidities about medications, but quite often the medication can also make other musculoskeletal conditions occur.
Yes.
And I find that incredible, that a medication can actually bring about another condition becoming worse in a good fight to make one better. So it's kind of like pinch from Peter to give to Paul, and it's a true catch-22.
What one were you thinking of when you said that? Because I was thinking of corticosteroids. So
yes.
if you take Allan with
Allan.
Oh my
Sorry,
God.
mate. I've really enjoyed this episode.
If you take Allan with his hands, he probably would have had steroid injections into the hands.
Yes.
So corticosteroid injection. Now, those steroids actually contribute to reduced bone mass density. And there's your link.
And linked to obesity. And obesity links to arthritis as well.
And that's what you said about the medications.
And it's kind of this like really vicious cycle. So I've been really fortunate, I think, to come across a couple of GPs that I've worked with that have primarily loved exercise. I think they valued exercise to first and foremost to start, and a healthy, active lifestyle and nutrition. Yeah. And their kind of good fight has always been, let's go down that route first.
Before we just go straight into treatment.
Before we go straight there. In fact, I worked with one GP locally in Plymouth, and what I loved about this was, although he valued exercise, I don't think he truly understood how exercise could be used, not necessarily in an exercise referral scheme, but how somebody, and this isn't about me, but how somebody like me as a FitPro could really value and empathise with conditions, with medications.
Oh, so you didn't see that as part of the treatment?
Yeah, he saw it as like the exercise referral, and he didn't see it outside of that.
All right.
So what I did, I invited the GP down, this guy down to a couple of my sessions. He joined in for a month, and he could really see that actually I valued training from a more holistic angle.
Nice. That's a good way.
And before I knew it, that became, dare I say, a private referral pathway.
Really powerful.
Where he would send me client after client. He'd go, Neil, this person's come in, they've got X, Y, and Z. Can you, if I send them your way, can you reach out? I'm like, go for it. It was wicked. It was a great pathway. And I helped so many people because I'd got the the GP on site.
Well, the GP is such a key authority figure that if the GP turns around to you and says, you don't need to do this, or you shouldn't do this, and you should do this, then you're going to listen to them.
I sat there in your exercise referral gym in Milton Keynes, like on countless occasions whereby the person would come in because the GP had told them to, and yet they still didn't know why they were there, didn't really want to be there,
or value
it. Yet the GP had said, you need to go and do this, and like, yes sir, 2 bags full, off they go.
Yeah.
And that's what I loved about this relationship with the GP, was the ability to kind of collapse that whole cycle down, and for him to kind of paint a picture of like, you're going to go and see this person, and he's going to reach out, he's going to be really friendly, he's going to ask you these types of questions, and he teed up the whole first consultation.
Great.
Which was great.
And I think that way of working with them works really well, that private
So I think,
referrals.
I know we've digressed a little bit, but I wanted to put in there was actually, I know exercise referral schemes, for a better word, I don't say don't exist, because they do, but how we see exercise referral moving forwards and how we operate within that is very much a crusade of you, not necessarily within a scheme.
Just becomes about working with long-term conditions.
Working with long-term, supporting
conditions.
clients and having empathy for clients and going, I can work with them. I don't need to be part of a scheme. I can still work with them. They refer a par Q.
But having the skill set behind
Yes.
you and the knowledge there.
So how we got there was that understanding that actually challenging someone's day, someone's average day first, value in exercise, having some modifiable changes to their diet has a profound impact and can change potentially what medication they're given, if a medication is given at all, or for a better word, could even be the dosage of that medication. Yeah. And I think that's incredibly powerful. Yeah,
incredibly. And it means that people still have massive control over their world and will stop more comorbidities later
And if,
on.
we mentioned this on previous episodes about, the 6 human needs, and people want to have this level of certainty in their world, not uncertainty.
Yeah.
And so by giving somebody the ownership and responsibility for their health and quality of life, and for them to value that and be willing and ready and committed to do that, I'll be honest, I've never found a person that didn't want to go down that route. Yes. And it comes down to empathy and communication.
Yeah, and making that enjoyable.
Yeah.
Making it all part of that journey.
Completely.
Because that's why they're here.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think with modifiable, I want to go down the route of like modifiable nutritional changes.
Good. I'm glad you went down that route.
Go for it. Do you want to fire away?
Okay, so in terms of different things that your client could be doing to help their musculoskeletal condition. So we've been talking about osteoarthritis and osteoporosis. So even just looking at osteoporosis, for example, at that point, there's certain foods that will benefit bone mass density and certain foods that will reduce bone mass density.
Lots of spinach, apparently.
But things that are bad for it is sugar.
Yeah,
really,
I don't want to demonise sugar here.
Because I do like sugar.
I think, let's get this really clear, and you can bat me down if you don't agree, and you can as well. Nothing is good or bad.
Yes.
Okay, it's for quantity. Too much of anything is bad, right?
Yeah.
So I could say, well, I turn around and go, oh, I'll have an Indian takeaway on a Friday night. That's fine, right? But if I had an Indian takeaway every night, now it's suddenly become bad. So I'm not going to demonise any food or sugar. It's all in, but it's for quantity of that.
Yes, and
I think makes something bad.
Exactly, and the thing with sugar in real short layman's terms, because it's quite technical how it all happens in the body, but essentially we need calcium in order to make our muscles move. We need calcium and other minerals in order to have our daily function of our body. Yeah,
completely. So calcium is used in every I can't get my words out here. So the production of ATP. Okay, so the yield of ATP, in the mitochondria, calcium must be present, along with various other B vitamins and minerals. So we're talking about magnesium, we're talking about chromium. Yeah. If those aren't present, then our production of ATP goes down. Now we haven't got, now we're going to feel lethargic, we're going to feel tired. Yes. And we can develop other conditions. So
the best bank to go and get your calcium from, if you don't have any access to it, is your bones, which is what Neil was saying about this bank.
Yes.
So there are certain things that if you don't have enough of this in the blood, then or mobilised around the body to be able to use, you can get it leached out of your bones, which then creates more likelihood that you will have problems with bone mass density as you get older. Now, one of the things for this is, like you were saying with sugar, is that sugar creates an acidic nature in the body. So it adds
within the blood. So the blood, we're looking at between like 7.3 and 7.4 pH. So from 0 to 14 is on pH.
Yeah.
So the acidity level versus the it's gone. Alkaline level. There you go.
Whereas calcium is really alkaline.
Completely. So what's happening is, if we consume refined sugar, okay, so fructose, okay, we're going to break that down. We're going to quickly metabolize that, store it in our body. It's going to be circulating as blood, circulating glucose. It's going to be stored in the body as glucose. And the more refined sugar we place in, okay, we're going to have this kind of constant battle to take the blood pH from acidic level back to its normal pH, 7.3, 7.4.
That homeostasis right in the middle.
Completely. And so if you've not got a diet that is a plentiful supply of all vitamins and minerals, the body is going to have to go and find those minerals that have been stored in the bank, which is your bone bank.
So you end up leaching it out the bones and using it to help restore the right pH in the body and have enough calcium to use your muscles and everything else. And then as a result, you're not getting as much bone density, which in time leads to osteoporosis.
And I can put the links below if we, I'll go and find them so we can put them below, but there's been various studies that have found the kind of, dare I say, the optimal daily refined sugar, or a sugar that does go in, recommended to go into the body before we go into the bank account. Okay, and it's an incredibly low amount of sugar. Okay, I think off the top of my head, there was one study done, and it looked at youngsters that weighed 25 kilos, and an average day was 5 grams. Okay. Of refined sugar,
which is what, 1 teaspoon?
Yeah, completely. Whereas when you now look at today's world of youngsters and what they consume and the macro split, it's so far away from that.
One glass of Coke is massive on sugar. Yeah. So if you've got that, and then you've got the caffeine, and then you've got
the phosphate. Is it phosphorus?
Yeah, phosphate.
So you've got phosphate. That's it. So you've got, I think, sugary drinks and carbonated drinks are the main culprit here. Yeah.
Okay. And I think the reason why this comes up in research is because it affects kids.
Yeah.
And if the kids are going, I don't like green fruit and veg. I don't like green veg. Don't like green fruit, do they say that? Green veg, green leafy vegetables, then the calcium's not coming in as they want. Yeah. That doesn't happen, but then their calories are topped up with sugary foods, and then at this rate, we said that peak bone mass density at 30
is it younger?
Brings younger.
The other kind of major shift outside of food that is driving some of these musculoskeletal conditions is going to be in females, and it's going to be the menopause.
Of course.
Okay, so that's obviously a shift between levels of hormone, so estrogen and testosterone, and therefore you're now not producing the same quantity of estrogen, which is fighting the good fight of bone health and building of bones. Now you're in real favor of osteoclasts that collapse the bone. And now you're on that speedway, you're in the outside lane of the motorway towards I'm going to call it brittle bone, or an osteoporosis, but a deterioration of bone compared to a male counterpart.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why one of the main treatments given for osteoporosis, especially obviously with women, is hormone replacement therapy. So if they're on HRT, then that will help strengthen the bones or maintain good build in the bones. Even though it's not necessarily about getting stronger and building it to more density, it's usually about preventing it from getting any worse. But that works really well.
We could go on lots of different things here, and I think that's what the exercise referral does very well. But let's add another thing. We've mentioned about menopause and that kind of being a speedway towards deterioration of bones for ladies. Now let's do it justice and let's go and attack the guys, just so it's even. Okay, so let's say that the guy is overweight, okay, to obese, let's say BMI 35 to 40, okay, this person is actually going to have a reduction in testosterone, okay, and now the male's balance between testosterone and estrogen is out of whack, which is also a route towards osteoporosis and musculoskeletal conditions. Okay, so
although it's 3 times more likely in women, guys get it too.
Completely. Completely. And I think the same off the top of my head would be that although the speedway starts for, say, a lady that starts in menopause at, say, let's just say 45, it's more like when male and female are now equal in terms of their risk of osteoporosis, it's 65.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, so as they get older.
Completely.
Yeah.
There we go.
Cool. So I know that we've gone down the route of osteoarthritis. I know we've gone down the route of osteoporosis and talked about osteopenia. There's one that's kind of sits on its own a little bit, really, which is rheumatoid arthritis, which I kind of want to dive down before we go down any kind of replacement stuff. Is that cool?
That's it.
So rheumatoid arthritis gets mixed up with osteoarthritis all the time.
Now, if you're some
different.
exercise referral courses still have an exam, and that is a typical question, I'll have you know.
Yes.
Not for me to suggest.
No. Now, the main difference here is that it's not come from wear and tear on a specific joint like we were talking about with osteoarthritis. Rheumatoid is an autoimmune response, and the body is attacking itself or breaking down and causing inflammation at the joint. So although it looks very similar, the cause is different.
Cool.
So instead of the cause being wear and tear, and therefore being on, like, say, Neil said, a dominant side, like Alan's hand was worse on the right. And rheumatoid,
eat spinach.
rheumatoid actually affects both sides, so it becomes symmetrical.
Nice.
So that's how you can kind
not
of
nice, sorry.
tell the difference. It's not nice. But symmetrical means that you can kind of show that that's usually down to rheumatoid arthritis, because it's about the autoimmune effect. The body's attacking itself to create that change.
And so we're probably going to see this as more of a genetic hereditary line as well, or linked to it.
Yeah, massively. And a lot less people too.
Okay.
400,000.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Different to 8.5 million.
Yes.
So when somebody says arthritis, we usually assume osteoarthritis. But don't forget, there are lots of other types. The second one is rheumatoid.
And how they're treated from a medication perspective and the guidance given from a GP will be very different as well. And next week, we're going to talk about medications and the kind of the side effects, the things for symptoms, what you're going to see with this, things to look out for, common errors, those types of things. And so just because someone says arthritis, we really want to find out and dig a couple of questions deeper to find out what that is, because the typical medications or how the medication's being used they vary from everybody. That's what we learn at level 2, right? Is it the law of individuality?
Yes.
Cool.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's the main point about rheumatoid, is the fact it's very similar to osteo. You've got to consider very similar things. The other thing I wanted to say is that because it's autoimmune, we've got to be careful about flare-ups.
Yeah.
In that they don't necessarily happen because you work them or because of a certain time of day, but people with autoimmune diseases basically have like peaks and troughs, and they
it's like
vary.
A rhythm.
Yeah,
like a roller coaster.
And they vary massively. So one day they just might suddenly be in this the trough phase, whereby they're not feeling as good and they've got lots and lots more symptoms and they don't feel as good.
I think the one thing all of these conditions have across the board is you're never going to get rid of it. It's not going anywhere.
No.
So we've got to learn to live with it and manage it as best we can from, I'm going to say, a holistic approach through activity levels is one of the, and how we exercise, like we mentioned earlier, of overuse, misuse and underuse of joints and muscles in the body and posture, how we sit, how we lay, how we move, how we drive a car, whether we have an automatic, whether we have gears. There's so many variables to life that determines how our skeletal system adapts over time, and therefore the muscles over time.
And then adapting that with your overload, so reassessing that overload, so that they might go to discomfort, but they're not going to go to pain.
No, because they're already in pain. And so now it's
You don't
understanding
want to make
what
it
pain
worse.
is. But we're not going to, I'm going to use the word cure, we're not going to get rid of this condition, certainly not rheumatoid, it's an autoimmune, the body is attacking itself. What we can do is slow down the deterioration of these conditions and bring back a level of comfort and away from discomfort. And that's what I love, the coaching we did with Tony Robbins, one of the things he taught us was we're always moving towards pleasure or away from pain. Now it sounds quite mean this, but isn't it? But what I love about exercise referral, but also musculoskeletal conditions, is more often than not, they're in pain. The client's in pain. So there's a lot of actual thoughts, feelings and emotions and leverage points of moving towards pleasure and away from pain. So from my experience, onboarding a client that is experiencing discomfort and having the confidence to, in consultation 1 and 2, and even during their program with you, digging into the pain. I use this analogy of like, imagine it was an open wound and kind of digging a pen into an open wound and almost making it more painful, allowing the client to experience all of the thoughts, feelings and emotions around their pain, the leverage points to help them take action, for them to take ownership and responsibility for their program and have this client-centered approach. But if I just dabble on that subject, they don't get enough of a reason to change.
It doesn't cascade the level of pain for them.
Yeah, completely. So I could cascade that level of pain inside their thoughts, inside their feelings, inside their emotions, that cascade of pain of what it means to their partner, their husband, their wife, their kids, their grandchildren, the sport they play, the sport they don't play, the work they do, the work they don't do, what they'd love to go on and do, the hobbies they stop doing. So the more I can cascade that pain into other areas of life, it means that they will either move away from pain and towards pleasure. And from my experience, musculoskeletal conditions, the very fact the pain is there, it's real, it's happening, you can see it, the fingers are deformed, for example, in Allan. There's some really, really key leverage points to bring about massive changes in your client and see some amazing transformations.
And they know they're not going to get any better just resting and doing nothing.
It's only going to get worse.
And that's that gap to stretch, really, isn't it?
Yes.
Of that, like, if you stay as you are, it will only get worse as you are, and you won't be able to do all these other things that you were just talking about. Whereas if you change now and you're able to just do this little bit, it doesn't have to be painful, it doesn't have to be like 1 rep max territory, but if you do this, you will get much better lifestyle.
Yeah, completely.
Functional life, less pain.
And showing them in the early stages of a program, I suppose, myth busting all of their perceptions and beliefs of what they thought exercise was or wasn't, and showing them that they can bring about a transformation in their discomfort, in their pain, in their condition, in their medications, their dosage, and without kind of, I didn't realise I didn't have to do burpees, or I didn't realise I could do it this way, or that's really interesting, I thought I had to go to a gym, I didn't realise you could come to me and we could just use a towel and a water bottle, I didn't realise we could. I've seen you take clients out and just literally walk from your exercise referral gym down the canal in Milton Keynes for however far and back again and do various exercises.
Holding a couple of resistance bands.
Yeah, and the response has been phenomenal. Not just from a medication perspective, a social perspective, a psychological perspective, getting out of the house, meeting other people. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that feeling that they were able to walk a little bit further than
hidden benefits is phenomenal.
It's self-belief.
This leads really nicely on to the final part, I suppose, of when these conditions do get worse. And you can't just manage it with lifestyle anymore. And we do fall over, risk falls prevention goes up, that type of thing. Or that the osteoarthritis gets so bad that there's severe deformity and severe pain to the point that it can't be remedied through what we're doing with it. So let's look at, we can get a lot of things replaced in our body. I don't want any of these. But the main thing, and knees and hips. But you can get a shoulder replaced. You can get an elbow replaced. You can even get your thumb and your fingers replaced now. It's crazy. Like where science has moved on to. You know, if you think you can get a heart transplant. Do you know what? There's actual new. It's not even new research, but procedures whereby they're looking at kind of stem cell production, where they're actually regrowing parts of the end of a bone to bring about and create the new knee. Wow. As opposed to it being it'll be your own knee, so the body doesn't reject it. Completely. Rather than made of metal and ceramic. Yeah, or a composite material, completely. Wow. What I find really interesting around surgery and having an operation is, first off, the pain, I use the word pain cascade, or the pain severity as it gets to that point. But it has to be really severe to go for to get a hip replacement. Or a knee replacement. Yeah, so I think it has to be long-lasting, severe pain at rest whilst medicated. And deformity. And yeah, completely. Because if it's impacting their life really badly to the point that you can only win by having it done. Yes. This is kind of the approach, really, with replacement, is if they're able to live their life fairly well, then the medical procedure will be resisted until they get to a point where they need it in order to live. So what we're talking about, I suppose, on this point is looking at how these musculoskeletal conditions, the pathology of them deteriorates over time and brings about that point where you go, pain is so severe, I've got to have a replacement. But what we aren't really discussed in this is the other skeletal pathologies that could bring about a joint replacement at a younger age. Like, for example, on our PT course, there was a 21-year-old guy on the course who's in the army, who's had part of his hip joint replaced. But that's not hereditary completely. So we're not really talking about that. So we are you could see knee replacement and hip replacements at a younger age, but what we're really talking about here is the deterioration of pain and musculoskeletal conditions over time to the point in which it's been medicated, they've tried their hardest, I suppose, with a holistic approach, and yet it's still giving severe pain at rest for long periods of time.
Yeah, I've worked with quite a few joint replacements. It's crazy. And I have to admit, the thing that amazed me the most is that they believed it would be amazing afterwards. Actually, the stats are 1 in 5 are disappointed with the result that
1
they get.
1 in 5 are disappointed. And the other stat with that is in the next decade, we're looking at 3.5 million knees are going to be replaced per year.
Wow.
That's just knees. So we're talking about a similar kind of stat with hips.
That's a lot.
Okay. We're talking about an incredible amount and I think that's only going to go up as we hit an aging population as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like one of the guys that I work with, JJ, he had Parkinson's and he was in a wheelchair all the time that I knew him. So he was wheelchair bound, big guy, ex-rugby player, really, really stocky, used to being quite athletic really, but his Parkinson's was really affecting him to the point that he couldn't really walk or stay mobile. And with the pain he had in his knee, he then went and had a knee replacement in the hope that this would allow him to kind of move more, allow him to kind of get about a little bit more, even with his Parkinson's. But because of how the operation took place and the lack of mobility he had in his knee before the operation and afterwards, he actually never regained full ability to extend the knee.
Therefore, couldn't weight bear it.
He only got to 45-degree extension. So from extension down 45 degrees. So think about it being bent
all the
time. So then we were trying to teach him to walk and extend, but he couldn't. If you try and walk now with one bent leg... So
remember, let's go back to the beginning.
You don't have it.
Joints act, muscles react. The muscles of the lower limb, so the muscles that bring about movement and forward motion or gait, okay, weren't able to truly do their job of the innate movement of a human being, of forward locomotion, because the joint wouldn't move past 45 degrees range of movement. Joints act, muscles react.
Yeah.
The muscles couldn't do it because of a joint.
Exactly. And then to the point that his whole program in the gym didn't become, like, we couldn't make that anymore. The range of movement in that knee is what it was. We worked around the area, we sort of done as much as we could to relax around the joint, but his main session was the focus of getting him standing and getting as much hip extension as we could and as much sort of knee extension we could in the other leg, so that at least it minimised some pain and just allowed some flexibility.
I suppose what was quite scary, I met JJ a number of times. I always used to pick Hayley up and always used to chat to all our clients at the end of the day, didn't I? It was really cool. But I remember talking to JJ after his operation and the weight gain he'd had because he'd been out of the gym, during the operation, and the recovery phase of that was a good 8 weeks plus. Yeah. And so JJ came back having done no activity, bed bound and chair bound. Even though he was in a wheelchair all the time, he would come to Hayley 3 to 5 times per week, only for short bouts. But just for the very fact, and this is a really odd thing I'm about to say, but I'm going to say just for the very fact that JJ would come into the gym, see his mates and have that social, that connection, kept his weight down. Now I get it, that wasn't a calorie deficit, but I'm going to say it had an impact on the calories he consumed because he felt like he was doing something towards his fitness, even though majority of the time he was probably just having a good old chin wag and used it as a social experience.
Yes.
But in that 8 to 12 weeks he was out, weight gain was rapid. And now the knee isn't bending past 45 degrees. He's got, let's just put on, say, half a stone or a stone of additional weight going down through these joints. Reduction.
Well, do you remember Grumpy John, the one that
I do.
Captain Birdseye?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, so he had this really cute little Westie dog, and what was
Yeah.
really interesting is as he was waiting for his second hip replacement,
On the same side or the other side?
other side,
Yeah.
he basically would take the dog for a walk, in inverted commas, but he would sit on his scooter, so a little motorised scooter, and take the dog for a walk, and then basically get so far and let the dog sort of run around a bit. Dog would get back on the scooter.
The dog would get on the
and
scooter.
then go back home. So
The
what I
dog
noticed
was
is I
actually
like,
obese. It
This
was an
dog
obese
is
Westie.
getting bigger and bigger and bigger as he was starting
Yeah.
to. But it shows, doesn't it,
Yeah.
that one thing
There's
cascades
a
to
number.
another.
There was a number of research studies from the PDSA, the Dogs Charity Trust, around the link between obesity in humans and their pets. It's crazy. Okay? But what the other side to it is the kind of a dissatisfaction that you mentioned earlier. And you actually had one client. I think it's quite a very sad story.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
really sad.
Is it her name?
Yeah, she's called Deirdre, and she used to come along to my chair-based exercise classes, and I never really understood to start off with, because when she first came in, she had her leg, she was in a wheelchair, but her leg totally out in front for the whole time, and I was like, they were saying, oh, she's just waiting for her hip replacement to set, but essentially what had happened
Which
was...
is pause for that, I do apologise. It's a very faulty belief to have, to let your hip replacement set, because let's just rewind a little bit. Once someone's had a hip replacement, one of the things the clinical staff and physio staff are going to encourage you to do is to get up and active, dare I say, almost immediately, to start walking 2, 3, 4 times a day for a good, and build up the time frame. So we come back to fit, frequency, intensity, time, and type. So the frequency is 2, 3, 4 times a day. The intensity is very low impact. So we're talking about slow walking, potentially with a rollator or a Zimmer frame,
underuse,
or
right?
underuse, or crutches. The intensity is, we mentioned that, but the type is walking, and the time would be, to start off with, let's just say 5 minutes, and then it would go to 6 minutes, and it would incrementally change very, very, very quickly, but very short steps. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's that range of movement and weight bearing to get the muscles, the ligaments, use that joint
again, so you can use the muscles again.
Yeah, whereas most people, their belief is, if I've got back pain or I've got a joint pain, then I rest it. And that's actually one of the worst things to do.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, with Deirdre, she basically had, they kept saying, waiting for her hip to set, and I was like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. And it turns out that actually her femur was broken, so it was actually she had a cast on that meant that she was waiting for her femur to repair. Okay, so that makes sense, because when you got a cast on, you got a cast on.
But here's the crazy thing.
Now, I was like, well, how did she break her leg? Did she fall over?
The femur's pretty damn, it's like the thickest, densest bone in the body.
And then the carer told me that she basically, Deirdre used to walk around absolutely fine, but she had pain in her hip, so she arranged for a hip operation. Now, Deirdre was on oxygen anyway, in the fact that, and she had severe asthma and COPD, which reduced, based on the steroids that she was on, it had reduced her bone mass density. She had osteoporosis.
So she was definitely in severe pain in her hip, but I just remember she was like, I'm going to call her like a battle axe. Like, she would just get on with it.
Yeah.
Walk around.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then she had her hip operation, but while she was on the operating table, her femur broke in 3 places. So instead of getting better, she actually ended up in a worse position than when she went in. And then she spent the remaining 6 months of her life in a cast, sat in a wheelchair. And then sadly she died because she wasn't able, and part of the link with the death with replacements, particularly hip replacements and hip fractures and any fracture of the bone, especially in older adults, is down to the link to clots, respiratory conditions, and the lack of activity in their world.
Which is the comorbidity. So it wasn't the hip replacement or the broken femur, it was the comorbidities that set in following that as the catalyst to it, which is quite scary. And there's actually the stats around the number of people that actually deteriorate rapidly, quality of life drops, and or they pass away following a major surgery like that, certainly for older populations, via comorbidities, is incredibly high.
Only 30%, well, only 60% make it to 10 years.
There we go. There we go. So enough on that
You
one.
know.
But I think the other side to it is when you talk about like time frame, somebody could have a hip replacement, and you know, depending on, I think technology has definitely got better the last 5 to 8, 10 years.
Yeah.
Is that hip replacement will last a good potentially 20 to 30 years now, whereas it used to be, is it called a Birmingham hip replacement?
Yeah,
you know,
Birmingham resurface.
we used to only last, I think, up to 15 years. So I think, if you're going to get, if a hip replacement, say, happens at, say, 50, 55, by the time you're, say, 65, 70, 75, you could be up on ready for the new hip.
Yeah.
Which is why, we really want to encourage, younger population now to adhere to and adopt a much healthier, more holistic lifestyle to get to bone mass peak at, closer towards 30.
Yeah.
So they don't hit that point of menopause or overweight or whatever comorbid, whatever it is that's the catalyst towards osteoporosis, rheumatoid arthritis, osteoporosis, whatever, that develops a joint replacement.
It's literally, we've spoken about the whole lifespan from kids and how they develop in their bone health, right the way through to how that affects us as older adults.
And we've learnt that we're going to have spinach and kale and cookies in a minute. Amazing.
I love the cookies. You can have
completely.
spinach.
Can we have a glass of Coke as well? No, I'm joking.
No.
But in all very seriousness, I've really enjoyed this musculoskeletal episode. So what we'd really like to know is what has been your biggest takeaway. What's been really nice as well is watching literally so many people comment inside either the inner circle on our social media. They've tagged us in on their stories. They've taken a picture of themselves listening.
Or hit reply to an email. Or dropped a comment on YouTube. It's your feedback that helps us steer this podcast. Yeah, absolutely. And hearing what your takeaways are and the things that you've gone, oh my God, I didn't know that, or I took it for granted, or oh wow, I watched my my family have this and now I understand
it. All makes sense.
Completely.
Completely. So with no further ado, we will park this episode here. This is episode number 8. Next week is number 9, obviously, for season 4. And we're talking about comorbidities, medications, and kind of starting to wrap up season 4. Yeah. Then season 4, episode 10, the following week, is all about the overall wrap up from the very start, the rise of common clinical conditions, what you can or can't do, and really going to answer some of the key common myth-busting, common questions that come through around exercise referral. We're also going to talk about the new qualification or the update. Nothing really changes, I suppose, other than the name change. So at the moment it's called exercise referral, level 3. It's now going to be called level 3.
Supporting clients with long-term conditions.
Long-term conditions, which is the same thing. I think it's just that recognition of what we mentioned earlier, that exercise referral schemes aren't, dare I say, a thing, but you're still able to go to a GP and create these private referrals and work with people that refer a PARQ, because the numbers of people that are referring a PARQ and still wanting to exercise has gone up.
Yeah.
There we go.
That does it.
So drop a comment below. Let us know what your main takeaway is. Drop us a 5-star review in iTunes. It's your support that is driving this podcast.
And make sure you've subscribed on YouTube if you haven't done that
And we will see you bright and breezy next week. See you later.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Neil Bergman.
And I'm Hayley Bergman. Over the last 10 years, we've helped thousands of fitness professionals to get qualified, learn with simplicity, and coach clients with confidence.
We're the first to say that learning and being a FitPro doesn't have to be hard work, and that with the right structure, support and resources, you can become a confident and knowledgeable fitness professional that is dedicated to more.
So how do you learn, qualify and kickstart as a FitPro? This is the FitPro Session Podcast with Parallel Coaching.